In this chapter, we discuss the fundamentals of capital budgeting, and the whole idea about capital budgeting can really be understood by just looking at this single title slide, where the manager on the slide is asking, should we build this plant? And so, capital budgeting is the process of making those types of decisions. So as we move through the chapter, we'll primarily be focusing on one step in the capital budgeting process. Capital budgeting, by definition, is the process of analyzing projects and investment opportunities and deciding which ones to accept. So ultimately, the investment opportunity could be something like investing in fixed assets, like we saw on the title slide. Do we invest in this plant or not? It could also be, do we undertake an acquisition? So do we acquire this other firm? The basic steps for the capital budgeting process for any sort of decision are going to be the same. So the end goal in this capital budgeting process is to determine the ultimate effect of accepting or rejecting a project on firm value. Ultimately, the manager's goal is to maximize the value of the firm. And so we're trying to figure out the impact of a decision on firm value because ultimately this is what's going to tell us should we accept the project or not. The first step in the capital budgeting process is to forecast the firm's incremental cash flows that result from the project. And here, one of the key words is incremental. We want to see how this project is going to change the firm. And so while right now we're just going to focus specifically on cash flows for the early parts of the chapter, later on, this term incremental is going to become increasingly important. The second step in the capital budgeting process is estimating the project's cost of capital. The cost of capital is something that gets discussed in a fair amount of detail in chapter 13. And so for the most part in this chapter, if we look at the cost of capital, we're just going to take that as given. And then the last step in the capital budgeting process is to employ the appropriate investment decision rule. And so investment decision rules are primarily covered in Chapter 8. For the most part, the vast majority of the time, what this is going to entail is applying the NPV rule. But in Chapter 8, there's a lot of focus on alternative decision rules and what to do in situations like when you don't have an unlimited amount of capital to take on all NPV positive projects. For the sake of this chapter, we're just going to focus our attention on being able to forecast a firm's incremental cash flows. Then we'll take the cost of capital as given and see how we can use these incremental cash flows and cost of capital to utilize the NPV decision rule.